In June 1962, the Soviet government announced that the price of meat would increase by 30% and the price of butter by 25%. Overnight, no debate, no warning. On the same day, a factory in the southern city of Novocherkassk cut its workers' wages. The workers went on strike. They marched to the Communist Party headquarters, carrying red banners and portraits of Lenin. They were not anti-Soviet. They were hungry. On June 2nd, Soviet soldiers opened fire on the crowd. At least 26 people were killed. Dozens more were wounded. 7 organizers were later executed after show trials. The Soviet government buried the victims in unmarked graves and forced witnesses to sign pledges of silence. For 26 years, no one was allowed to talk about it. This is what happens when a state controls every calorie its citizens consume. And this is the story of how 280 million people survived a system designed to feed them and failed. The Soviet Union in 1980 was home to 280 million people, spread across 11 time zones, from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean, from Arctic tundra to Central Asian desert. Feeding them was the single largest logistical operation in human history. And the Soviet state, which controlled every farm, every factory, every truck, every store, was convinced it could do it better than any market economy. The state would plan what was grown, how much was grown, where it was sent, and what price it was sold at. Every calorie consumed by every citizen would be determined by bureaucrats in Moscow. What could go wrong? The system was called Gosplan, the State Planning Committee. Every year they produced a national economic plan that specified, down to the kilogram, how much bread, milk, meat, and vegetables would be produced and distributed across the entire country. In theory, this was genius. No waste, no overproduction, no speculation. Every mouth fed. In practice, it was a disaster, because a plan written on paper in Moscow in January could not account for a drought in Ukraine in July, or a frost in Kazakhstan in May, or a train derailment in Siberia in September. And here's the fatal design flaw. The plan could not be changed. Once Gosplan set the targets, they were law. If a wheat harvest failed, you couldn't simply redirect resources. You had to wait for the next planting cycle, which was next year. But there was a deeper problem. The numbers in the plan were lies. Soviet factory managers and farm directors routinely inflated their production figures, a practice so common it had its own name, Pripiski. It meant false reporting. If a regional director needed to show that his province had produced 10,000 tons of grain and the actual harvest was only 7,000, he reported 10,000 anyway. No one checked. No one could check, because checking would mean admitting the plan could fail, and the plan, by definition, could not fail. So Moscow planned based on numbers that were fiction, and citizens starved based on plans that were fantasy. Now imagine this. You're walking down Gorky Street in central Moscow in 1980. You pass a store with gleaming windows. Inside, you can see shelves stacked with salami, cheese, imported chocolate, French wine, fresh fruit. The smell of real coffee drifts through the door. This is Beriozka, a store where you can buy everything that doesn't exist in regular Soviet shops. But you can't go in, because Beriozka only accepts foreign currency, dollars, pounds, Deutschmarks, and you, a Soviet citizen, are legally forbidden from owning foreign currency. The store exists in your city, on your street, in your country, but it is not for you. It is for foreigners, diplomats, tourists, and a tiny elite of party officials who travel abroad and return with hard currency. Imagine walking past that window every day. Imagine seeing your own country's products, or products you can only dream of, displayed behind glass you cannot cross. That was the Soviet food system. 2 worlds, one visible, one unreachable. So what did Soviet citizens do? They adapted. They developed an entire culture around standing in line. Imagine you're walking to work in the morning. You see a line forming outside a store. You don't know what's being sold. You don't ask, you join. Because in the Soviet Union, a line meant something was available, and that was enough. The Soviet queue had rules, unwritten but universally understood. If you asked "Kto posledny?" who's last? You were now at the end. If you left the line, someone could hold your place, but only if they knew you. If you pushed in, the entire line would turn on you. The average Soviet citizen spent approximately 2 hours per day standing in lines. 2 hours every day for basic food. That's 730 hours a year, 30 full days, an entire month of your life, every year, spent waiting for bread. And then there were the sausage trains. That's what people called the electric commuter trains that ran from provincial towns into Moscow and Leningrad. Kolbasnye Poezda. Imagine you live in a small city 200 kilometers from Moscow. Your local store hasn't had meat in 3 weeks, so you wake up at 4 a.m. You take the first train into the capital. You spend the entire day hunting for food across Moscow's stores, which are always better stocked than the provinces. Sausages, cheese, butter, whatever you can find. You fill your bags, your suitcases, your pockets. Then you ride home. The Soviet Union had a name for this officially. They called it import of goods from the capital. Unofficially, everyone called it survival, because in the Soviet system, food was distributed by hierarchy. Moscow got the best, Leningrad got the rest, and the provinces got whatever was left, which was often nothing. There was one food item that every Soviet citizen knew by name: doctor's sausage, Doktorskaya Kolbasa. It was first produced in 1936, developed by the All-Russian Research Institute of the Meat Industry, specifically for people suffering from malnutrition and illness. Hence the name, doctor's sausage, prescribed like medicine. The original recipe was genuine: beef, fatty pork, lean pork, salt, sugar, cardamom. By Soviet standards, it was good. It was also one of the few protein sources available to ordinary people. But here's what happened. In 1974, the recipe changed. Meat shortages forced the state to replace real ingredients with fillers: starch, soy, mechanically separated tissue. The pale pink color came not from quality meat, but from added nitrates. Everyone noticed, everyone complained, but there was no alternative, and the price stayed the same, so people kept buying it. Doktorskaya Kolbasa went from being a symbol of care, sausage as medicine, to a symbol of decline. A product that still bore the name, but had lost everything the name once meant, much like the Soviet system itself. But here's where the story changes. Because Soviet citizens didn't just wait in lines, they grew their own food. The Dacha, a small garden plot given to citizens by the state, was technically meant for recreation, a place to escape the city on weekends, breathe fresh air, maybe grow a few flowers. In reality, the Dacha became the Soviet Union's real food supply. By the 1980s, Dacha gardens produced over 30% of all agricultural output in the Soviet Union. 30%, from private plots that made up just 3% of agricultural land. The state farms and the kolkhoz and sovkhoz were inefficient, corrupt, and demotivated. Workers took from them constantly, not because they were criminals, but because the system left them no choice. Imagine you work on a collective farm. You see potatoes rotting in the field because no one came to collect them. You take some home. Is that stealing? Or is that refusing to watch food go to waste while your family goes hungry? Soviet citizens didn't call it theft. They called it survival. But on the Dacha, people worked with passion because the food they grew there was theirs, not the state's, theirs. And that one word, theirs, made all the difference. There was another word that every Soviet citizen knew: blat. It meant connections, influence, the art of getting things done through who you knew, not what you could pay. Need meat? Your neighbor's sister worked at the meat processing plant. Need bread? The bakery truck driver owed you a favor from when you fixed his car. Need imported goods? Your cousin was a sailor on the Baltic fleet. Blat wasn't corruption, not in the Soviet mind. It was survival. The official system didn't work, so people built a shadow system that did. And food was its primary currency. If you were lucky enough to know someone who worked in food distribution, you ate well. If you didn't, you ate what the state store had, which on most days was bread, potatoes, and cabbage. If this is blowing your mind, subscribe, because everything you think you know about the Soviet Union is about to get a lot more complicated. Here's a paradox that summarizes the entire Soviet food system. The Soviet Union produced more than enough meat to feed its population. On paper, per capita, meat production was comparable to Western European countries. But on the plate, different story, because between the farm and the fork, up to 30% of all meat spoiled during transport. The Soviet logistics system, refrigerated trucks, cold storage, distribution networks, was catastrophically underdeveloped. Meat sat on loading docks in the summer heat because trucks were late, because the plan said the truck would arrive at 2 p.m., but the driver was drunk, or the truck broke down, or the road was closed, and there was no backup plan because the plan was the plan. Soviet citizens had a joke. Why do Soviet shop assistants have such bad attitudes? Because if they were friendly, the store would be empty even faster. By the late 1980s, the system was collapsing so badly that the government reintroduced rationing, coupons called talony. Each talon was valid for 1 month, a different color each month, so they couldn't be reused. You needed talony for sugar, for soap, for tea, for cigarettes, for meat. Money alone was no longer enough. You could have rubles in your pocket and still go home with nothing, because without the right talon, you couldn't buy. Imagine having money in your wallet, standing in a store, looking at a shelf with products on it, and being told no, not because you can't afford it, because you don't have the right piece of paper. This wasn't the 1930s, this was 1989, 2 years before the Soviet Union ceased to exist. But there was one thing the Soviet Union did right, one food item that never ran out. That was always available, always affordable, always there. Bread. Soviet bread was subsidized so heavily that a loaf cost 2 kopecks, less than a cent. It was cheaper to buy bread than to bake it yourself. And the quality? Surprisingly good. Soviet bakeries used traditional recipes, real ingredients, and slow fermentation. The black rye bread, chorny chleb, was genuinely delicious. Bread was the one promise the Soviet system kept, and it was not an accident. The czars learned this lesson the hard way. When bread ran out, revolutions happened. In 1917, it was bread riots that toppled the Romanov dynasty. The Soviet leaders studied history. Bread would always be there. Whatever else failed, bread would not. And so for 70 years, the Soviet Union was a nation held together by bread. Not ideology, not patriotism. Bread, dark, dense, sour, perfect bread. The Soviet food system failed in almost every way a food system can fail. It was inefficient, inflexible, corrupt, and absurd. In Novocherkassk in 1962, workers who asked for affordable food were shot by their own government. In the provinces, citizens rode sausage trains for 8 hours just to buy a piece of cheese. In Moscow, ordinary people walked past Beriozka stores full of food they could see but could not touch. By 1989, the system was so broken that the government was rationing basic groceries with colored paper coupons, like a wartime economy in peacetime. But somehow, through Dachas, through blat, through bread, 280 million people found a way to eat. Not well, not easily, but they ate. And that somehow, that improvised, desperate, beautiful somehow, is the truest story of life behind the Iron Curtain.